Welcome to the League of Women Voters and the Alliance for the Arts Virtual Candidates Forum. Some of the League's voter service activities include candidate forums and voter guides. This information is made available to the voting public to help in their decision-making process. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization that does not support or oppose candidates or political parties. Happy learning.
Welcome to a candidate forum presented by the League of Women Voters of Lee County in conjunction with the Alliance for the Arts. The purpose of these forums is to inform the voting public of the opinions of the candidates running for office. It's not a debate. There will be no crosstalk between the candidates. There won't be any comments from one candidate on another candidate's position. They will be given 2 minutes to open. They will be given 2 minutes to close. They will be given 1 minute to answer each question. The order of answering the questions and opening and closing is random, to be decided at the beginning of the forum itself. So sit back and enjoy. Thank you.
Welcome to the Board of County Commissioners District 3 Candidates Forum. All candidates that are running in District 3 were invited. To give you some background, the Board of County Commissioners are elected county-wide, but those running must live in the district that they are representing. We will start off with Mr. Betos on the 2-minute welcoming statement.
Good evening, and thank you for having us. I'm running for the Lee County Board of County Commissioners, District 3. I'm originally from New York City, where I worked in the hospitality industry for many years, mainly with the hotels. I worked for 6 hotels owned by Harry and Leona Helmsley, and I ran the food and beverage operation for all 6 hotels. I also was in the country club business for a few years, where I managed 2 different country clubs. Came here in 1999, looked for a home, bought a home finally in 2000, and have been here on a full-time basis since 2002. I have been active in the quality of life issues with our community since about 2005, working with the Lee County Commissioners, the South Florida Water Management District, and our delegation in Tallahassee. I was honored to be involved with the incorporation of Estero back in 2012 and 13, which ended up with the city becoming the 402nd city in the state of Florida. And I had the honor of being the first mayor of the village of Estero in 2015. I've been on the council for 5.5 years, and I've been advocating for these quality of life issues, water issues, growth management during this whole time. I have decided to run for the county commissioner's position because I just felt that our current county commissioners have been going in the wrong direction for the last 5 or 6 years, and we have been losing track of what I believe the residents came here for and want, and that is a better quality of life and not overdevelopment. I hope that you look at my record and look at what I want to do. Thank you.
Mr. Truax.
Yes.
Your 2-minute opening statement.
Okay, my name is Todd Truax. I'm running for County Commissioner, District 3 in Lee County. My background is in mental health and aging. I've been a nursing home administrator and a social worker for over 25 years, 22 of which down here in Southwest Florida. I've been responsible for budgets of $5 to $10 to $25 million. I've been supervising staff of 250 to 350 staff, 365 days a week through hurricanes, natural disasters, rehabilitations, and through infectious episodes. My background, again, I've got a master's degree in social service administration and a bachelor's in science and psychology with gerontology concentrations. I saw what was happening with the county commission 2 years ago when there was issues with the red tide, the blue-green algae, and I didn't see enough being done to address that. And now I see the issues with the COVID-19, and I don't believe the county commission has done what they promised to do as far as protecting and serving the community in Southwest Florida. Their backgrounds are, you got to excuse that for their backgrounds in police work and marketing and public relations, and my background's in healthcare administration. I've been on call 24/7. I've had to take care of quite a few critical clinical issues and worked closely with physicians, nurses, and epidemiologists to address dire, deadly diseases in the past. And I think I'm more prepared to address that issue than the current administration. I want to step in there and help manage this crisis before it gets any greater an impact on our economy. Again, my background speaks for itself. I've served the community for 25 years, and I look forward to extending my community outreach as the county commissioner.
Thank you. The first question will be answered by Mr. Betos. We will alternate answering questions. The first question, Mr. Betos, would you support restoring Lee County's impact fees to 100%? Why or why not?
100% I would. I've been advocating that for the last 7 years. I think that growth should pay for growth. And when new people come in here, whether it be residential or commercial, they should pay for their share of the infrastructure that's needed because they've come here. The infrastructure being roads, schools, parks. Our schools and our roads are overcrowded, and we're in dire need of additional funds. This is not the only source of revenue, but we cannot afford to give up the $162 million that we've already given up because of the reduction of the impact fees. Right now, we're only charging 50% of what it should be. And so I believe that we should be charging the full amount, and I would advocate for changing that immediately.
Thank you. Mr. Truax?
I agree that the impact fees have given away, again, $162 million. And I see a compromise. The commission recently had addressed this issue, and they talked about, well, we would adversely affect folks of modest means that can't afford to pay the impact fees. So I suggest either 100% of the impact fees to recoup those losses, or a sliding scale where 100% is charged to new homes over $300,000. And homes over $200,000 would pay 60%, and anything under $150,000 would pay zero in impact fees. That would at least increase the amount of impact fees we have to cover the infrastructure needs, and then allow for those folks of modest means to get that starter home or that attainable or affordable home right from the get-go. It would alleviate that need for a larger down payment and a greater mortgage for a greater period of time.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Truax, you start. What leadership would you provide to address the effects of climate change in Lee County?
Well, right away, there's talk of hardening and resiliency, and nobody's really talking about retreat. Already in the Keys and in Miami, we see king tides that aren't even being affected by hurricanes or major storm surges that are inundating local neighborhoods. Key West has seen that it would cost millions of dollars to save homes worth less than $500,000 just to build a street for a road, a number of houses that are like 6 to 12 houses on a street. We got to recognize that we have to draw the line somewhere. And if we don't, then the FEMA will and the insurers will, and they'll pull out of insuring homes for 30 years that are right along the coast. So we need to protect our coastlines and yet plan for a retreat for areas that are below the waterline or not very much above the waterline that will soon be under the waterline. We need to make those plans and then build up our resiliency where we can.
Thank you. Mr. Betos?
I think that the question is a very important one, and how we're going to handle it is a very difficult problem. We do have property rights that we have to be concerned with, and we just can't take away the property rights that are there unless we're willing to pay for it and to buy it. And that should be under consideration. But I think there are other things that we can do most immediately, and that is that we can make sure that areas that are on the coastline, like mangroves and the areas that are being protected, stay protected. Unfortunately, our county commissioners have most recently been taking up for consideration eliminating some of the mangrove areas that are used to protect the higher tides. But I also believe that we should look at preventing construction in areas that are in the coastal protected areas so that we don't have the problems. We don't want to become a waterfront home when we live a mile away.
Thank you. Mr. Betos, what measures would you propose to preserve wetlands in Lee County?
I think that to protect the wetlands is something that's very important, and it's something that has been overlooked or not taken seriously by some of our county commissioners. Most recently, they had a comprehensive plan amendment which reduced the protection of wetlands for commercial properties. I think that we have protections in our codes for wetlands, and we should enforce those and be very stringent upon them. I think that we should realize that the wetlands are an important part of protecting our environment and also for our water supplies. I think that the main thing that we can do is just not allow to have, when construction is requested, not allow the destruction of wetlands to occur.
Thank you. Mr. Truax?
Our wetlands are key to our survival. They're the key to our source of clean, fresh water from our aquifers. Our designated groundwater recovery areas and resource areas have been mined. Potato farms have been turned into strip mines for limestone rock, and that's going to drain straight into our aquifers. The protections that we had for Conservation 2020 lands, the money we set aside that the people of Lee County voted for has been diverted to covering the general fund rather than buying more wetlands and green spaces in the county. Right now, the average for the state of Florida for every county is about 35% protected area. And we're not even near that. I think we're in the 20s. The money that we set aside and we voted for has not been covered. The MAP 14 plan that our county commissioners decided to cast aside that protected our wetlands is now allowing more and more lime rock mining.
Thank you. Mr. Truax, would you support solar in Lee County? How will you promote it? Install on county buildings? Why or why not?
Yes, I would promote it. I've already worked with Dr. Simons over at FGCU. He built the solar array at the university, and he's planned and built solar arrays all over the United States and the world. Dr. Simons is a leading figure in solar planning, and I propose, as part of my platform, is to put solar arrays on all public Lee County buildings. It's going to save on the revenue for the cost for supplying air conditioning and electricity to those buildings. And B, it's a long-term savings, and it would be a demonstration project for further growth and expansion of solar. We can train through our technical schools, FGCU, Hodges, and FSW, students that can help build those arrays, plan for those arrays, sell the arrays to the residents of the community, and we can create a network that would be more dependent on the sun versus dependent on burning coal or natural gas that we currently have through FPL.
Thank you. Mr. Betos?
So I definitely would support it. I think that the county could take the lead in this by putting it on their own buildings. I think that we can go further than that, though. I think that this is an area where the county could step up and show its leadership by giving incentives to people, whether it be commercial or residential, to take that step. We could help them with possibly bonding the acquisition of solar panels and have people pay it back over a number of years in their taxes. But it's something that we in Florida should be the leader in this. and there's just no leadership to help promote this and to even encourage it coming from the county. So I would definitely work towards that, and I think that it's something where people would take advantage of it if they could do it affordably.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Betos, what are your plans to implement safer streets in Lee County?
I think that one of the things that we really have to do is appreciate the work that our law enforcement has done and support them. If it means we have to add to the amount of money that goes into it, so be it, because there is nothing more important than the health and the safety of our citizens. I think that what our sheriff has done, the sheriff's department has done over the years, as far as the SROs in schools, has been really, really critical. And I'm for the SRO program because I think these are highly trained people who understand what is needed in our schools to protect our children. And also at the same time, they're also developing relationships with our students that go beyond the classroom. And it also helps them to obtain information about other things that are happening that might not be so good. So I would support the sheriff's office completely.
Thank you. Mr. Truax.
As far as safer streets, Mr. Betos went down the path of the current issue of defunding the police. I've seen those proposals before. I don't believe we should militarize our police. I don't think they should have SWAT and assault vehicles and leftover military vehicles and all this armament it seems to be a bit of overkill. The SROs, the student resource officers that are stationed in each school, it creates an environment where students feel as though they're inmates. There's an armed guard there at the school, and they have a single point of entry. And I think those resources could be spent better on teachers and art teachers and music teachers and teacher salaries. I think we've gone a bit overboard. I believe more guns is more death. And having an extra gun in the school just makes me a little more nervous about my students in the schools just around my neighborhood.
Okay,
as far as safer streets,
you have to end. Your time's up.
Time's up.
Okay.
Didn't see it.
Okay, Mr. Truax, under your leadership, how would you protect the integrity of the Citizens Initiative Conservation 2020?
First off, I'd want to refund the Conservation 2020 monies that have been diverted. They brag about having a balanced budget, but basically what they've done is stolen the money that we set aside, voters elected to pay those taxes towards, and use that money towards the general fund. We've neglected in our responsibilities to purchase those lands for Conservation 2020, increase our parklands, and I think that's been a grave disservice to the voters of the county who asked to have that money set aside to buy more lands. We need to expand our green spaces. We need to protect the panther and the bear, and as well as the manatees that inhabit our areas. And we need to have more areas where they're safer to travel. So whether that's additional mangrove areas or parks along the beach, I would support that right away.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Betos?
Well, I also feel that the 2020 program has been tremendously successful, and that we had supported doing it. The residents had supported it. The diversion of the money, or the taking of the separation of this money, which we had for many years, and we were able to see how much money was taken into the program, how much was still in the fund, and we would see all this. The transparency is gone completely, and I think that if not illegal, it's immoral what they've done. So I would restore that back, or try to restore that back to what it was. I also would look at the transparency and the how the committee is made up that selects the land. Right now, it's just heavily laden with developers and people in the development community. I would try to make sure that my appointments would be people who understood the environment and the importance of property and how to evaluate it, not just look at it whether it's developable land or not.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Betos, what steps would you propose to ensure smart growth in Lee County?
I think that we have to stop looking at where we can get massive amounts of property, no matter where they are, and allowing them the sprawl that occurs with that. I think that we have to start looking at infill, to start incentivizing infill in areas that we want. I think we have to also look at as a negative thing the way they're doing it. A good example is what they did on Corkscrew Road. We had the DRGR, which had originally 85,000 acres of land that should be very, very sparsely built. And they're now putting overlays on top of that and increasing the density by 10 and 20 times. So I think that we have to stop looking at what builders want and say that we have a comprehensive plan and we're not going to change it just because we are asked to have development in there. We don't need all that extra money because a lot of that comes with a reduction in quality of life.
Thank you. Mr. Truax.
When Mr. Betos mentioned infill, I want to cover that a little further. Basically, when I back when I was in Cleveland 20, 30 years ago, I saw the sprawl of the suburbs, and they grew further and further out from the center of town. And in my 20s, I recognized that. And in the center of town, walking distance to Times Square and all the hub of the city, there was homes that were being abandoned or being neglected and lots that were empty. And so we need to focus on filling in that empty hole of the donut, because the roads are there, the sewer lines are there, the water lines are there. And we have to focus on not just adding more homes to that area, but also building up that area. So if there's storefronts on the first floor and homes and condos or apartments on the second, third, fourth, fifth floors, that would be the infill that I would support in managing our growth. Instead of continuing to spread outward and taking away all our green spaces, we can focus again on building up from the center.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Truax, how would you protect Lee County's groundwater recharge area?
Immediately, I go back to map 14. Stop any further development of mining or new development permits or amendments to the plan that we have already established. It took years to make that plan. If we want to revise the plan and still allow for those green spaces, the water recharge areas, we should stick with the plan and not have all these amendments. I've seen that our commissioners are freely granting permits and waivers and amendments. And just when I was over on Daniels, out by the new baseball field, and I saw there's all kinds of Panther signs saying the Panther Crossing. You got to go slow at night. You can go faster during the day. But that's where the Panthers really cross. They go north and south across Daniels Road. And right where the Panther Crossing is, there's a huge gated community that's blocking the path for the Panthers to get to the trees across the other side of the road. We need to strengthen those pathways so that those Panthers aren't walking through our neighborhoods.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Betos?
I think that, if the residents of Lee County don't start acting, it'll be too late. The DRGR on going down right down the middle where Corkscrew Road is, we had up until 4 or 5 years ago, we had 5,000 homes up there. Now they're permitted for an additional 6,000 homes, and there's space and talk already for another 10,000 homes. We have to stop this from happening. And the only way that we're going to stop it is stop worrying about whether or not we keep enlarging and enlarging and enlarging. When it was mentioned about map 14, the plan that built map 14 was done by the Dover Coal Report back in 2011 or 12. And it took us millions of dollars and years to develop that plan. It was done out very carefully. And just in a matter of a couple of months, our Lee County commissioners threw it out the window.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Betos, what measures would you propose to meet affordable, attainable housing in Lee County?
I think this is a difficult problem. I think Lee County in many parts of Lee County are blessed with really desirable locations, and it comes with high price tags on real estate and makes it difficult for affordable housing. But I think we have to be very ingenious and look at things, look at out of the box. I've talked to people already about the idea of taking an area that will have a relatively expensive homes or condos in place, but we could incentivize the developer by giving him in certain areas additional density, but part of that density would come with a requirement that they give those homes to people like teachers, healthcare workers, firemen, policemen, so that we can keep them, they can afford to live near where they work. And as long as they're living and working in that area, they can get the benefit of that lower income, that lower priced home housing.
Thank you. Mr. Truax?
Affordable, attainable. Those are key words for folks that are, just graduating out of college or want to move out of their parents' home, or folks that are of modest means that are retiring and don't have several $100,000 to plunk down for a house in a gated community on a golf course. Some of that infill I talked about when we develop higher and build smarter is to develop places where there's condos there's penthouse condos where they're multi-million dollars, and in the same building there's affordable apartments or condominiums that are much more attainable on a different level of the same building. You can have a pretty plush apartment in the same building and have a Spartan studio or one bedroom in the same building on a different floor. I think we need to increase that diversity across classes. And I don't think just having a segregated area within a gated community for teachers and officers and healthcare workers is quite the same thing.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Truax, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers held a citizens 12-week, 2-day-a-week Southwest environmental impact study that looked at wetlands and uplands for reasonable growth in Lee County. Would you educate yourself about the EIS findings, why or why not?
Yes, I would. I met with the folks from the Army Corps of Engineers several times, especially during the red tide and blue-green algae episodes. It was most recently at the Yacht Club over in Cape Coral. While they were having their talks and discussions about the valve that they control for Lake Okeechobee releases, there was a dead manatee and its nursing infant bobbing in the waters outside of that yacht club. There was a packed house, and people were very, very upset about what's been going on with the water that comes down through the Caloosahatchee from Lake Okeechobee. And basically, the Army Corps at the time was just saying that we're responsible for the valve and we're regulated as to what levels are kept for the Lake Okeechobee. And so, yes, we need to work with them to focus on that water and planning for the future and control that wastewater that's flushed down.
Thank you. Mr. Betos?
Yes, I would definitely get involved with understanding what anybody has, any ideas and any projects that people could come up with that would help us. I think that we are working towards helping to solve some of our problems. I think that in the next 3 or 4 years, we'll have some ways of moving water south the way it was naturally meant to be, and it'll help the Everglades. We will maybe be able to reduce some of the pulsing that's occurring down the Caloosahatchee that's causing a lot of our problems. But we're still going to have the problem of polluted waters that we have to handle in one way or another, unless we look at the sources of these pollutions, and that's coming from a lot of it's coming from away from our area, but we are ending up receiving it. So we have to look at other areas and look at any ways that we can find, whether it's scientific ways or engineering ways.
Thank you. Mr. Betos? What measures would you propose to protect Lee County's water quality?
I think that this is part of what we mentioned earlier, but in addition to the things that I mentioned earlier about the water quality, I think that there are things that we can do locally. I think that we have excellent fertilizer ordinances in place, but there is no enforcement of them. For some reason, the county just doesn't enforce any of that ordinance they have in place already. In addition to that, we have tens of thousands of septic tanks that are in Lee County. And this is something that we have to work towards improving that problem. Many of them are too close to our water bodies. We have to, in a short term, look at having them inspected on a regular basis, whether it be every 2 or 3 or 4 years. On a long-term basis, we have to work at getting them transitioned into sewer systems so that we don't have these leachings going into the water supply and contaminating our water.
Thank you. Mr. Truax?
The fertilizer bans are helpful. Again, there is no enforcement for that. And immediately what we can do is not allow any additional septic tanks to be built unless somebody has a 10-acre plot. That's one of the first things we can do that would forestall any great big developments with lots of septic tanks. There's really 100,000 septic tanks in the county. 100,000. They have not been inspected since they were built. Some of them since back in the 40s, sometimes even further back. We need to make those sewer and water connections as soon as possible, to especially along those areas along the coastline, along the North Fort Myers area and the Billy's Creek area. And then even in Bimini Bay and Cape Coral, we saw that they wanted to do their milk jug raft race, and they couldn't do their race because of the amount of fecal matter that was in the water in Cape Coral. We can't point up to Lake Okeechobee. We can't point up to the cattle barrens for those issues, because those are homegrown issues we must address right away.
Thank you. Mr. Truax, what challenges do you see for Lee County because of the COVID-19 impact on county resources?
Right away, county resources. The revenue is going to be down. The tax revenue from tourists, from visitors, from shops, from restaurants, from bars, theaters, you name it, rental cars, that's not happening. Nobody's going to the ice skating rink. Nobody's going to the bingo hall. Nobody's paying any additional taxes other than for food and groceries and gas to get around. And a tank of gas now lasts, a week or 3. The COVID is going to have a huge impact on our county resources just to cover the staff that the county has and keep providing the services that we have. We need to plan for tightening our belts. And I know folks are afraid of any additional costs for our taxes, and we need to make the most of what we've got and make a plan that slowly allows for that growth once we recover from this COVID. But in the meantime, mask, wash your hands, and keep your 6 feet away.
Thank you. Mr. Betos?
Well, one of the things that I see coming out of our county commissioners is saying, well, they're in good shape because they have the money. There's not going to be a reduction in the real estate taxes this year. But as it was pointed out, they are going to lose money from sales taxes and other revenue sources, which is very significant. We must look at, specifically during this time, we must look at how every dollar is being spent. This is something that, on our particular situation in Estero, we're doing that now. We are looking at dollars that we have a significant reserves, but we're still looking at what we can do to tighten it down, because we don't know how long this is going to last. Hopefully we'll have some resolution to this by the beginning of the year, but we don't know that for a fact, and we don't know when the next one to come down the line is. So we have to look at this very carefully and look at the money we're getting from the government and how we're going to be helping the people that are hurt already.
Thank you. Mr. Betos, what leadership will you provide to meet the human services resource needs in Lee County? Do your plans include a children's service council?
I think that we have to look at these areas, and I believe that we should be doing more than we are doing. I think that we have to look at first, because this is not going to be an inexpensive project to do, and we have to look at where our resources are going to be coming from. But yes, I believe that we should be doing it. And in fact, the county commissioners tried to take this up about 4 years ago when it was brought up by Commissioner Mann to bring it up to discuss it. He couldn't even get a second to discuss it. I think that we should discuss this, and we should If need be, we should look at maybe this is something that, like the 2020 program, if the residents feel important, that this is important enough, then maybe we should look at a millage rate, a half mil, to sponsor this if that is what's necessary. But yes, we have to look at taking care of those people who are not being taken care of right now, and there are a lot of them.
Thank you. Mr. Truax?
The Humans and Veteran Services Office is inundated right now with requests through the CARES Act money. The commissioners were bragging last month that it takes 4 times as long for the residents of Lee County to get through to get help versus the businesses of Lee County. Right now they're using people from the library, from Parks and Recreation to help cover the calls and manage those cases. And those folks really don't have any training or background in human services and social work. I would support the Children's Services Council or Resource Council. That's a lot of revenue that could be focused on children for pre-K, and that's for all classes of folks. And we need to focus on the children for our future and make sure that they have all the resources they can have available, made available to them. I've been on the lines with Harry Chapin Food Bank. We've fed 400 to 500 families in 2 hours time and ran out of food. I've been on the board for the Cafe of Life. We've been feeding 50 to 150 a day.
Okay, time's up. Okay, we're getting ready for the closing statements. But before that, I want to thank Mr. Truax and Mr. Betos for participating in this virtual forum that is sponsored by the League of Women Voters and the Alliance for the Arts. Okay, Mr. Truax, would you like to start, please? You have 2 minutes for closing remarks.
Thank you. Thanks again for this opportunity. I'm glad to be able to speak to folks. We're very limited now with no soccer matches, no bingo halls, no open forums and audiences to speak to, and Zoom is the new way to reach out to the community. I think I have proven myself as capable and willing to serve the community. I've been doing that for the 25 years that I've been here in Southwest Florida, whether it's through the Florida Healthcare Association, founding the district, working towards mental health services by bringing Royal Palm mental health facility here. I was on the coalition for the optimal behavioral health and aging. When our mental health services were farmed out to folks up in Manatee or Miami, it was all over the place as far as what we had for mental health services. David Lawrence Center has been very good. And most recently, we've expanded our services here through our efforts. The community is in need of somebody with some healthcare background and experience right now with this COVID crisis. We've got plenty of folks with backgrounds in real estate and development, and they're funded heavily by those developers and real estate folks. It's about time we had somebody that has that social service mindset that's served the community, has been a benefit to the community, and is out for just additional service and expansion for the community. We need to manage our growth. If you like spending time on 41 or I-75 hour after hour, then more growth is what you'll get if you keep voting the way you've been voting. I provide an option and an alternative for some newer perspective, and I hope I can bring that forth on when I'm sworn in on November 17th of 2020. Again, it's Todd Truax at toddtruax.com. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Betos?
I also thank you very much for the opportunity of speaking to you tonight. I feel that in the primary that I'm running in, I'm the only candidate that has the ability to saying that it's not what I'm telling you now that I'm running for a position. It's not that I'm just saying things and maybe not follow them through. I have been advocating for these for 15 years, and anybody can check my record over the 15 years of what I've advocated for and what I've fought for: the environment, the quality of life issues, the impact fees. These are all things that I've been doing for 15 years. In addition to that, the fact that I was involved in involved in starting up the Village of Estero and being the first mayor of it, and saying at that time that we were going to be government light and we were going to be conservative in the way we spend money. And as a result of that, the Village of Estero today can say that we have had 4 out of the last 5 years, we've lowered our tax rate. We are the lowest tax rate in Lee County. We have reserves in excess of $25 million for a small little city. So these are the things that I've been involved in, that I've shown that I can do, and the leadership that I've had. I've also had experience in my working career, working and managing large hotels, the food and beverage operations, the hospitality industry. And so I'm familiar with that, and I'm familiar with what it takes to be successful in that business, and also to help work with the people that are coming down here. I hope that everybody is safe, stays safe and stays healthy, and gets out to vote, and make sure that they vote at the August 18th primary. My website is Nick Bedos 4 leecounty.com.
Thank you. Again, I would like to remind the voting public that the Board of County Commissioners are elected county-wide, but they live in the district that they represent. Again, thank you very much. And the league will be posting this on our website, which is lwvlee.org, as well as you can go and put in the browser vote, VOTE 411.org, and it will take you to the area where you put in your information, and it will give you the information that you will be voting on. Again, both to Mr. Truax and Mr. Betos, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank
And
you.
good luck.